War began, as it often does, with laughter. Not the nervous kind. Not the strained politeness of diplomats pretending not to hate each other. This was genuine, rolling amusement echoing through the vaulted chamber of the Galactic Concord, where 1,000 species had gathered to watch humanity's first real defeat be formalized into law. The human delegate stood alone at the center dais. No entourage. No ceremonial armor. Just an aging man in an outdated naval uniform, posture straight from habit rather than hope. Admiral Marcus Hale had commanded fleets before half the species in the room had discovered fire, and somehow that made him less impressive to them. "So let me confirm this," said High Strategist Vorwin of the Krell hegemony, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that translated loosely to smug delight. "Earth rejects the surrender terms." Hale didn't answer right away. He studied the chamber, the crystalline delegates, the floating intellects, the insectal warlords who had never once in their evolutionary histories lost a war they didn't immediately quit. "No," Hale said calmly. "We reject your assumptions." That earned him the laughter. Holograms blossomed in the air, displaying casualty tallies in elegant Concord fonts. Human ships reduced to expanding debris clouds. Outer colonies marked pacified. Supply lines severed with surgical precision. The Krell invasion had been a masterpiece of modern galactic warfare. Fast. Clean. Overwhelming. Humanity's defenses had folded exactly as predicted. "You are outmatched," Vorwin continued. "Outnumbered. Outclassed. Your species has courage, yes, but courage does not stop plasma." Hale finally looked up, eyes cold as vacuum. "Neither does arrogance," he said. More laughter. The Concord had seen this before. Young species always mistook stubbornness for strategy. Humanity, for all its noise and ambition, was still biologically fragile, politically fractured, and inefficient by galactic standards. Their ships were ugly, boxy hulls, layered armor, redundant systems instead of elegant singular solutions. They fought like engineers, not warriors. Which, the Krell believed, was why they would lose. "The vote is procedural," announced the Concord speaker. "By unanimous consensus, the Krell hegemony is authorized to continue hostilities until full human compliance is achieved." The chamber lights dimmed. Trade lanes closed. Diplomatic protections were withdrawn. Earth was officially at war with the galaxy. Admiral Hale tapped the comm on his wrist as he turned to leave. "That'll do," he murmured. The first Krell strike group arrived at Mars 47 hours later. They expected resistance. A last stand. A glorious extinction event they could package for military academies and recruitment holos. Instead, they found silence. Orbital platforms hung lifeless above the red planet, power cores cold. Shipyards were empty, massive dry docks yawning open like abandoned jaws. Even the traffic beacons were dark. "Scans show recent evacuation," reported a Krell sensor officer, confusion creeping into his pheromone signature. "No heat trails. No distress signals." The fleet commander frowned. "Proceed with occupation. Deploy ground." A human broadcast cut across every channel simultaneously. Not a demand. Not a threat. Music. Old. Grainy. Male voices singing slightly out of tune. "When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah." The Krell commander recoiled. "What is this?" "Unknown," the officer replied. "Civilian cultural artifact?" Then space folded. Human ships tore into real space without warning, no clean hyperspace transitions, no courtesy beacons. They arrived inside the Krell formation, so close that collision alarms screamed before weapons even charged. They were smaller than Krell warships. Cruder. Covered in scarred plating and mismatched hull sections like they'd been welded together by angry gods. And they were accelerating. "Raise shields!" the commander shrieked. Too late. Railguns fired at point-blank range, not precision shots but storms of mass, tungsten rods, scrap metal, depleted uranium slugs spinning so fast they glowed. Krell shields flared, buckled, and collapsed under sheer kinetic insult. A human cruiser plowed straight through a Krell destroyer, armor shredding, atmosphere venting, crews still firing manually as alarms howled. Open human comms flooded the channel. Close enough to smell M. Ramming speed, you bug-eyed bastards! Tell Earth I finally hit something. The Krell commander watched in horror as one human ship, engines already aflame, altered course directly toward his flagship. They're damaged, an officer cried. They can't survive that trajectory. The human ship didn't slow. It didn't try to evade. It accelerated. The impact tore the flagship in half. The explosion bloomed outward, swallowing half the formation in incandescent fury. Debris slammed into nearby vessels, chain reactions ripping through the fleet like a thrown knife through glass. In less than 3 minutes, the Mars strike groups ceased to exist. Back in the Concorde chamber, emergency signals began to arrive. 1 defeat could be dismissed as an anomaly. 2 raised concern. 3 triggered panic. Humanity wasn't defending its borders. It was ambushing. The next target wasn't a frontline system. It was a Krell logistics hub 3 jumps behind the advance. Then a fuel depot. Then a repair dock whose destruction stranded an entire battle group without parts or power. The humans never announced themselves. They left messages instead. Burned into station walls. Transmitted from hijacked beacons. Etched into hull plating with cutting lasers. You came to end a war. We came to start one. On Earth, far from the front, Admiral Hale stood in a dimly lit command bunker, watching the feeds with an expression that held no triumph. A young officer beside him swallowed hard. Sir? Concorde analysts are calling this irrational. They say we're throwing lives away. Hale took a slow breath. They still think war is about winning battles, he said. We're teaching them something older. He turned toward the strategic display. Dozens of human task forces moving in unpredictable arcs, vanishing, reappearing, hitting where no one expected. When you fight humans, Hale continued quietly, you're not fighting a government. Or a fleet. Or even a planet. The officer looked at him. You're fighting memory. Hale finished. And we remember everything. Somewhere in the void, a lone human ship drifted, reactor failing, hull cracked. Its captain recorded one last message before impact. For anyone listening, he said, blood on his teeth, grin unbroken. You wanted to know if humans were worth conquering. The ship fired its engines one final time. Hope you got your answer. The galaxy tried to make sense of it. That was the first mistake. The Galactic Concorde convened emergency sessions stacked on top of emergency sessions, analysts shouting probability curves at politicians who had never worn a uniform. Tactical models were rewritten in real time, only to fail again within hours. Human attack patterns refused to stabilize. There was no center of gravity to strike, no capital world to threaten, no unified front to collapse. Humanity was fighting like a swarm of ghosts with a shared grudge. They're ignoring conventional objectives, Boruin hissed, mandibles twitching in fury as another tactical overlay dissolved into red. They don't hold territory. They don't defend assets. They waste ships. They are not wasting them, replied a Concorde military observer quietly. They are spending them. The Krell hegemony pushed harder. That was the second mistake. Fresh fleets surged forward, only to discover that supply lines, once pristine, protected by layers of doctrine and automation, were rotting from the inside. Fuel convoys arrived with contaminated antimatter. Ammunition shipments were replaced with inert mass. Entire battle groups sat dead in space, reactors fine, weapons intact, with nothing to feed them. Human cyber warfare was inelegant but relentless. Where other species used surgical logic viruses, humans used layered junk code, brute force hacks, and something far more dangerous, improvisation. No two intrusions looked alike. Countermeasures learned to stop one attack only to fail catastrophically against the next. A Krell logistics commander committed ritual suicide after discovering his own supply AI had been reprogrammed to reroute food shipments to human refugee flotillas, while broadcasting a looping message in broken Krell dialect. We eat later. You eat never. The Concorde condemned the act. Humanity did not respond. Instead, the humans showed the galaxy what war looked like up close. Captured footage began appearing on neutral networks, leaked by species who had once dismissed humans as soft. Videos shot from helmet cams and shaking civilian recorders. Boarding actions. Corridor fights. Zero-G brawls where blood became lethal shrapnel. Human soldiers did not fight clean. They kicked open airlocks to vent enemy troops into space. They overloaded gravity plating mid-charge, shattering bones. They taped explosives to doors labeled medical because Krell doctrine placed command nodes behind hospital zones. One Krell Marine, pinned and dying, transmitted a final plea to his commander. "They don't stop," he rasped. "They're wounded. They're bleeding. They won't stop." A human voice answered over the open channel, close enough to hear breathing. "Yeah," it said. "That's the point." The Krell attempted retaliation by enslaving captured human colonies, broadcasting images of shackled civilians to force negotiations. That was the third mistake. The images didn't break humanity. They unified it. Human space was full of people who had never liked their governments, their militaries, or each other. But slavery hit something older than politics. Older than ideology. Smugglers became strike leaders. Pirates became supply officers. Retired veterans, just passing through, found themselves wearing armor again, patching old unit insignias onto mismatched gear. And then there were the civilians. A grainy transmission spread across the Concorde faster than any official statement. A human woman stood in a dim holding cell, her face bruised, eyes calm in a way that unsettled even hardened Krell officers. "My name is Elena Cruz," she said. "You took my husband during the evacuation of Vega 7. A bound Krell officer knelt beside her, mandibles restrained, eyes wide with dawning terror. "He was a mechanic," Elena continued. "Never fired a weapon. Fixed engines. Loved bad coffee." She looked into the camera. "You wanted leverage." She took the officer's sidearm and pressed it under his chin. "This is me returning it." The shot echoed. The feed cut. The Concorde declared the execution a war crime. Humanity replied by releasing a list of names. Not demands. Not threats. Names of enslaved colonists. Coordinates of holding facilities. Schedules of Krell patrols. Across occupied space, human retrieval teams struck with terrifying precision. Camps were erased. Transports vanished. Survivors were evacuated to routes no strategist had known existed. In several cases, the rescuers stayed behind. The Krell learned to fear human volunteers. Morale across the hegemony began to fracture, not because they were losing battles, but because nothing they did ended the fighting. Every strike generated 3 reprisals. Every atrocity came back magnified, personalized, delivered with a cruel intimacy that made it impossible to distance the cost. Vorwin slammed his claws into the Concorde floor. "They are barbarians!" he roared. "They fight without honor, without limit." A small, ancient species seated near the back spoke for the first time in centuries. "No," it said softly. "They fight without illusion." As if summoned by the words, every public human channel activated at once. Admiral Hale appeared on screen, his uniform darker now, stained with weeks of sleepless command. "You still think this ends when one side runs out of ships?" he said. "That's not how human wars end." Behind him, tactical maps flickered, not of battles, but of infrastructure. Worlds. Stars. Economic arteries. "This ends," Hale continued, voice steady and terrible, "when the idea of attacking us becomes painful." He leaned closer to the camera. "And we're just getting started." The transmission cut. Across Krell space, stars began to flicker. For 21 standard days, the galaxy held its breath. No human ships appeared. No ambushes. No hijacked broadcasts dripping with dark humor and threat. The swarm went silent, and for the first time since the war began, the Concorde allowed itself to believe the humans had finally burned out. Markets stabilized. Fleets regrouped. Vorun announced preparations for the decisive counteroffensive. Their economy is shattered, he declared to the Concorde. Their population centers are exposed. We will end this madness with overwhelming force. Some of the older species remained uneasy. Humans, they had learned, only went quiet when they were building something. The first alarm came from Krell core world Jethrix Prime. Astrophysical sensors reported localized gravitational anomalies. Brief, precise distortions that didn't match any known weapon signature. The planetary defense grid cycled through threat models, finding none that applied. Mining artifacts, one analyst concluded. Residual debris from industrial activity. That conclusion lasted exactly 11 seconds. Jethrix Prime did not explode. There was no dramatic flash, no shockwave, no cinematic death screen visible from orbit. Instead, the planet began to come apart. Continents peeled away in slow, horrifying arcs, as if invisible hands were delicately unthreading the world. Oceans lifted into space as glittering ribbons of vapor. The core was exposed, not shattered, but carefully cored and siphoned, its mass redirected along pre-calculated vectors. Billions died in silence. The star system remained stable. The moons continued their orbits. Where Jethrix Prime had been, there was now only a growing ring of industrial platforms assembling themselves with terrifying efficiency. Every platform broadcast the same message on all frequencies. Never again. The Concorde erupted into chaos. This is planetary annihilation! Vorwin screamed. They've crossed every line! Admiral Hale's response arrived less than a minute later, calm and unhurried. No, he said. Annihilation would have been easier. This was education. The truth, once uncovered, chilled the galaxy far more than the act itself. The weapon was not military. It was civilian. Human deep-core mining arrays, tools used for centuries to crack asteroids, build habitats, and harvest planetary mantles, had been scaled, networked, and repurposed. No exotic physics. No forbidden technology. Just engineering pushed past the point where ethics usually stopped it. Any species with enough industry could have built it. Only humans had chosen to. Panic spread through the Concorde. Emergency ceasefire proposals flooded every channel. Entire fleets reversed course, abandoning offensives mid-jump. The Krell hegemony did not retreat. It charged. Driven by rage, humiliation, and terror, Krell war fleets surged toward what they believed was humanity's heart, the Sol system. Every remaining reserve was thrown into the push, a blunt force attempt to crush the humans before another world could be unmade. They found Sol waiting. Empty. Earth's orbit was littered with wreckage and old defense platforms, some active, some drifting. The moon hung scarred and cratered, but lifeless. Mars was a ghost. Scans show minimal population signatures, reported a Krell sensor officer, confusion edging into fear. No significant heat output. No biospheres at scale. Vorwin snarled. They're hiding. Flush them out. The Krell advanced. Then space itself betrayed them. Human ships emerged not in thousands, but in tens of thousands. Not capital vessels, but smaller craft, retrofits, freighters, mining rigs, habitat tugs, each bristling with improvised weapons. Civilians. Those aren't warships, a Krell commander whispered. They are today, replied another voice breaking. The humans didn't form battle lines. They formed nets. Gravitic traps collapsed hyperspace exits. Debris fields ignited into kinetic minefields. Old satellites, written off as junk, powered up and fired. Boarding pods slammed into Krell hulls before shields could cycle. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. Human fighters didn't retreat when wounded. They latched on. They cut through hulls with mining lasers turned surgical. They vented compartments, then sealed them again just long enough to move forward. Open comms filled the void. Tell your kids you fought humans. Smile. You're about to be a lesson. A Krell officer, bleeding out in a breached command deck, grabbed a human by the arm. "Why?" he gasped. "You've already won. Why keep killing?" The human, an older woman with gray hair tucked under a helmet scratched raw by decades of use, paused. "Because," she said quietly, "you still think this is about winning." She pulled free and moved on. In the midst of the slaughter, the final revelation hit the Concorde like a supernova. Earth had never gone dark. It had been emptied. Humanity had scattered its population long before the first Concorde vote, into deep space habitats, generation arcs, hidden stations woven through asteroid belts and nebulae. Sol was never meant to be defended. It was bait. The war was never about saving Earth. It was about teaching the galaxy what happens when you corner a species that evolved fighting itself, and got very, very good at it. As the Krell fleet disintegrated under 1,000 improvised blades, a final human transmission echoed across every channel. "This lesson is almost over," Admiral Hale said. "Pay attention." The Krell hegemony collapsed, not conquered, not surrendered, but evaporated under the relentless pressure of human ingenuity. Their client species rebelled. Their admirals defected. Entire sectors of occupied worlds rose up in revolt rather than face another human reprisal. Fleets that had once inspired terror were now scrapped drifting through space, every broken hull a testament to humans' refusal to fight conventionally. The Concorde convened once more, this time with humility etched across every species' physiology. Every envoy had been forced to watch humanity operate on a level of chaos they could not predict, a level of cruelty wrapped in methodical precision that left even the oldest militaries speechless. The treaty was drafted hastily. Reparations, borders, formal apologies, everything designed to soothe the galaxy humiliated by the species they had underestimated. But when it was signed, only one man represented humanity, Admiral Marcus Hale. "You've won," the Concorde speaker said, tone carefully measured, voice trembling in ways it never should. "What do humans want now?" Hale leaned back, his uniform stained with weeks of command and the fatigue of seeing worlds burn in measured doses. His eyes, steady and unyielding, swept across the room. "We want you to remember this," he said slowly, deliberately. "Every time you see a human ship, every time you hear our music, every time someone claims we're weak because we argue, or joke, or love too much." He paused, letting the silence stretch long enough to feel like a warning. "War didn't make us monsters," he continued. "War reminded us what we already were." The treaty signed, humanity withdrew, not to occupy territory, not to claim tribute, not even to watch. They left planets, fleets, prisoners, yes, even the ones who didn't deserve it. They returned what they could, and ignored what they couldn't. The galaxy understood immediately that this was the final and most terrifying truth. Humans didn't fight for conquest. They didn't fight for glory. They fought for memory. For honor. For vengeance that was creative, relentless, and infinitely patient. And the unspoken promise loomed over every star system: if the galaxy ever forgot, humans would be more than happy to remind it. Slowly. Precisely. Brutally. Across the void, small skirmishes still flared, minor disputes in systems long abandoned by Earth. But every commander, every fleet, every politician knew there was no scenario in which humans were weak, no battlefield where they were predictable, no enemy who could ever truly rest easy. Some called it deterrence. Some called it vengeance. Humans called it survival, and in their smiles, in their stories, in their quiet return to the shadows of space, the galaxy understood one unbreakable truth. You can underestimate humans once. Twice if you're lucky. After that, you learn the hard way. The stars themselves seemed to echo the warning, faintly vibrating through comm arrays and navigation grids alike. So you think you know war? You haven't seen anything yet. And somewhere, far from prying eyes, Admiral Hale toasted quietly to the galaxy's hubris, lifting a chipped cup of bitter coffee, a crooked grin on his face. "Good," he murmured. "Let them learn." Because the galaxy had just discovered the oldest human truth: humanity never forgets, never surrenders its cleverness, and fights not merely to win, but to matter. And that was terrifying.